this video, I'm going to show you how to make my Teabag Tote. If you haven't already, head to my Etsy shop linked in my description to download your pattern now. This pattern is suitable for confident beginners and has been designed to be made in under an hour. First, you'll need a pair of pre-loved trousers. Ideally, they will be made from a faux leather or faux suede. These fabrics don't fray when cut, so you can leave edges unfinished. They are easy to come by, and compared to real leather and suede, they can be easier for beginners to sew. Here you can see the unfinished edges on the inside of the trousers. I found that these seams had been fused on the inside. This means that they are stuck down using an iron-on tape. This meant that in some areas, it wasn't possible for me to unpick and reuse the fabric. Next, it is also worth checking the care label for any key instructions on how to care for the bag once it's been made. You can see here that it states this garment may fade and stain surfaces and or other garments in lighter colours. Just something to be mindful of. It can be washed at 30 degrees but should not be bleached, tumble dried, ironed or dry cleaned. Again, worth noting in case I need to wash the bag later on. Next, unpick the inside leg seam of the trousers. Repeat on the other leg. Next, you can position the pattern on the bottom of the trouser leg. As I mentioned before, I can't use this hem area because it's been fused together, so I will position my pattern just above this. If you're a beginner, you may want to find an area of your pre-loved clothing where you can avoid cutting into a seam. This avoids having to re-secure the cut seams later in this video. Place the pattern onto the fabric, ensuring that all edges of the pattern are well within the fabric boundary. I aligned the centre of the pattern with the outer leg seam so it would look intentional on the finished bag, but you don't need to do this. Place paperweights on the pattern to hold it in place whilst you cut. Because faux leather can show permanent pinholes, I wouldn't recommend pinning the pattern down. I'm using a roller knife here, but if you're a beginner, you may find it easier to draw around the pattern with chalk and cut it out using fabric scissors. Cut 2 of this pattern piece. The pattern is designed for you to be able to leave the curved edge unfinished. Because this faux leather doesn't fray, I can leave the edge unfinished. If your fabric frays, I'll show you some finishing options later. Before we sew the pattern pieces together, you can see here that I cut across an existing trouser seam. If I leave it like this, the stitching may unravel and create a hole in the bag. In a lot of cases, the best way to secure this is to stitch on top of the existing seam, like I'm showing you here. But as mine are mostly stuck down, I can't access them all. Instead, I will place a small stitch about 0.5 centimeters from the edge, perpendicular to the seam. This isn't quite as secure, but for a lightweight occasional bag like this, it should work well. If you're a beginner, as I mentioned earlier, you may want to avoid cutting through existing seams on garments. Next, we will sew the pattern pieces right sides together. Sew 1.5 centimeters from the edge of the fabric, around the 2 pattern pieces as I am showing you here. I've used a few pegs here to hold the pieces together, but you can also use sewing clips. Carefully sew around the pattern pieces, stopping and pivoting as you need to. Ensure that the needle is always in the fabric when you pivot. Remember to reverse stitch at the end of your sewing as well as at the beginning. You should have something that looks similar to this. The next step is optional, but you can gently iron your seams open by protecting the fabric with an untextured cotton tea towel or scrap cotton fabric. Next, you're going to sew the top of the handle. Take the top edges of both sides and place right sides together like this. Align the edges of the seam allowances, and if you can, also align the side seams, one on top of the other. Clip or peg in place as required. You will then sew a straight line across the top of the handle 1.5 centimeters away from the edge. Remember to reverse stitch at beginning and end. As before, you can iron this seam open now if you wish, remembering to use a tea towel or scrap fabric to protect your bag. Now turn the bag through to the right side. A tip for turning through the corners is to poke your index finger inside the bag corner and meet your thumb on the outside of the bag. Use your thumb and finger to guide the corner through carefully. Then wiggle the fabric gently until it forms a neat point. Alternatively, if you have a much thicker fabric, you might find that carefully cutting off excess seam allowance in the corners may help. My fabric is quite lightweight and soft, so I am just going to turn my corners through without cutting the seam allowances. This next part is for optional finishing around the exposed raw edge. If you want to skip it, head to the next chapter. There are many ways you can add finishing to this bag. You could bind the edge, overlock it, or fold the edge under before stitching. As this fabric does not fray, I will simply fold the raw edge under once by 0.5 centimeters and stitch into place. If you're using a fabric that frays, you may opt for one of the other finishes. Next, you will move on to folding and stitching the handle. Turn the handle through so you can see the reverse or wrong side. Then fold one edge down by 1 centimeter, then fold again towards the center seam. Repeat along the other edge. You will need to make sure you tuck and fold all raw edges neatly to avoid them sticking out like this. So I'm just going to readjust the raw edge here so they are neatly tucked in. Holding together or clipping in place with the outer side of the handle facing up, sew right through the seam. You should now have your very own teabag tote. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments below. And feel free to check out my other patterns on my Etsy shop, linked in the description.